Hello, folks. Thanks for hanging out. The film was dedicated to Uncle Chi-Chi, who, by the way, is Frank Pavich's dog, who sadly passed away, but passed away as perhaps the oldest living dog on record. So Frank's dog had been in the New York Times before Frank was in the New York Times. Now they've both been in the New York Times. So the idea was to have a little Q&A, which we had done in New York, which was a lot of fun. And I know that there's another showing and people probably have to go, so I just want to quickly answer any questions if anybody had any questions. I know some of my friends are here. Come on. Hello.
Hi. So did you do any kind of looking into the music? Do you have any access to the music of the score that Jodo was working towards? Did you use any reference in that way?
So far as I know, there was nothing done. I'm not sure.
Repeat the question, please.
The question was if I had had any access to any of the music that may have existed for the Dune score back in the day. To my knowledge, nothing was done. I don't think Pink Floyd did anything. Magma it's kind of implied that they had started to embark on something. I was familiar with Floyd and Magma. I'm actually not a big fan of Magma. They're a little intense. I respect them artistically, but I told Frank, I said, I bought a Magma record. I'm a big progressive rock fan and all that, but I actually sold it right away because they're so fierce. As he says, terrible. They're terrible in a musical way. But so I just had kind of a knowledge of the music of the era. But I think what's important to note is that Jodorowsky himself composed a lot of music and performed a lot of music on his previous films. So as much as he wanted to have a different band for each planet, I think he probably would have tied things in together himself. And if you study his stuff from Holy Mountain or whatever, he had a certain timeless quality that I think is a subtle way in which those films still stand up so well today, because they don't sound like psychedelic movies from the early 70s. He had a timeless quality. You heard a little bit of it in the Holy Mountain clip there with the throat singing and the, that kind of stuff it's kind of truly timeless. You don't know what the ethnic instruments are. It goes beyond its own era. So if anything, Pink Floyd may have sounded a little dated in context for each one of the planets, but story goes that it was also going to be Peter Gabriel and Tangerine Dream, and that I certainly is it kind of in my DNA anyway, so that's kind of coming through. And then Henry Cow, which for the prog rock fans out there, Steven knows that stuff. That's Henry Cow's pretty out there, so was already in my wheelhouse. I hate that term, but I knew that stuff pretty well anyway. So.
What is the possibility that it could be brought to a miniseries, or will it ever reach the screen?
It's there's a lot of rumor about that because the question was, will it ever be a miniseries or be brought to the screen? From what Frank Pavich said, I think somebody who is a director, and I forget the fellow's name, was at Cannes, saw this and immediately ran to Jodorowsky, who was there at Cannes, and said, "Why have you not given me the script? I'm going to do this." So apparently somebody's already approached him about trying to render this, and in today's standards, they want 12 hours. They want Lord of the Rings and all that kind of stuff. So obviously Lucas had a pretty long run with the Star Wars franchise, so who knows? But I think Dune has been done so many times that there are a lot of Dune fans that have approached Frank through the Q&As and everything along the way, and they've got their own version in their own heads. So I was recommending that they should just crowdsource the movie and figure it out and let people do an ongoing, Dune saga and let them do it. So. Yes, sir.
Have you read the books?
No. That was the running joke. I don't know who worked on this actually read the books. It's really bad. And yes, my lovely girlfriend bought me the book, and I still haven't even cracked it open. I didn't have any time. I need the Cliff's Notes or whatever. And it took me watching this about 4 times to realize what the plot stuff might be. And so my only take on it was when Frank called me and said, you know, the Harkonnen planet, they're the evil guys. I was like, okay, I got that. I can do evil. That's easy. Yes?
Yeah, I was just wondering how long it took you to do the music for this, and how many of there are you that did music?
Well, the music stuff was interesting because this film took about 3 years to do, and I think it really took 1.5 years to do because Frank changed it right in the middle of the process. He, at a certain point, called me up and said, I'm ditching the whole thing. Like, we're starting over again. We're going back to Jodorowsky's house, and we're gonna focus more on that storyboard book and make it really about that. And I already had a lot of pre-existing music in my library when Frank called me, because he knew my style of doing this kind of what they call krautrock and electronic ambient music. I've been playing in San Francisco here for 20 years, and I used to play like the Oxygen Bar on Valencia Street, or playing out. And then with Edward Dahl, who's back there, we do Spacecraft, which is kind of krautrock, and we play a lot of public events in town. We play the De Young and various art walks, J-pop, all kinds of interesting things around town. So I already had a lot of flowing electronic ambient music that was kind of happening on a weekly basis in my life. So in that sense, it didn't take a lot of time sitting down with paper and writing out notes or anything like that. But as Frank changed the iterations of the movie, then I'd have to pull some all-nighters because nothing was ever a lock until the very last moment. So a lot of it was done actually really fast and under duress, you know. so I don't know how the next one will be. Yes, sir.
Have you heard anything? Is there any chance they might publish that book somehow?
That's been like the #1 question, like from everybody, is can we get the book? From what Frank says, it's unlikely, which is weird, because you've got a couple of different artists in there, all of whom have their own like family estates that are being worked. You know, people have different managers and all that kind of stuff, and the word is that probably not. So I hate to say, I don't think so. It's just people kind of fighting over the rights, and there's apparently it's even disputed as to how many physical copies of that book exist. He's got his, but they say there's 2 or 3 in the whole world. So who knows? Yes?
To record the soundtrack, did you use 70s synthesizers, or did you synthesize the synthesizers?
No, you know, I'm totally against software synthesizers nowadays. Some of you may know there's a lot of, you know, stuff that you can emulate stuff from the 70s. I've always had analog synthesizers, even when it wasn't cool. So I have a Moog that I bought on the street here in San Francisco for $40, which is now worth, you know, $1,500 because people realize that these things are like Stradivariuses, or however you say it, Stradivarii. But yeah, I used as much real analog as possible, and I didn't sequence any of this in the computer. If you're hearing a lot of diddly, diddly, diddly stuff, it's the arpeggiators, as they call them. They're kind of built into the machines, and I feel there's an actual spirit in the circuits in those machines, and I recommend anybody who likes synths to go see or rent the Moog documentary about Robert Moog. It's really the way his name is pronounced, but he gets pretty metaphysical in that movie. He's like, it's in the circuits, man. It's like deep. And you gotta get in there with them, you know. So but yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, will a soundtrack be available?
Yes, and I'm embarrassed to admit I don't have one yet. So there's some Spacecraft stuff for free on SoundCloud, and it's Spacecraft with a K-R-A-F-T, like Kraftwerk, you know, so Spacecraft. Soundtrack is being compiled, and I use the excuse that in the trying to be non-commercial, where he's saying, you know, it's art and not commerce. I didn't have the commerce aligned. Thinking like I have to sell these things in the taco stand outside, you know. I have to get it together, and it's got to feel right. So hopefully soon, hopefully by next week, because right now, even Frank is like, hey man, art aside, like people really want to hear this thing. So definitely just follow Kurt Stenzel, whatever, on Facebook, or it'll hopefully float around out there. And I definitely intend to do vinyl, hopefully. You know, double vinyl if I can, or whatever. So we'll see.
KurtStenzel.com.
Yeah, KurtStenzel.com, right, that's right, I got that far. Luckily they made that easy nowadays. But, yes, sir.
How did you and Frank come to meet and eventually start working together?
That's a pretty wild story. So we're both from Queens, New York, and kind of the same neighborhood. And Frank had bought my demo tape when he was a kid. I'm 7 years older than him, so when you're 13 and 20, you're light years apart. So I was already out in the New York hardcore scene, playing like CBGBs and all that stuff. Frank lived in the neighborhood. I was selling my demo tapes at the local record store. He bought one, and it wrecked his life. So then he got into hardcore, and his first documentary is called NYHC. It's about New York hardcore, and that's from the 1990s. And at that time, he really profiled the label that I was on at that time, and they said, you should meet this guy, he's a big fan, and kind of stayed in touch roughly, but we weren't that much in touch. And then I had printed an 800 number on one of my records, because I knew if I was poor and lost my phone account, that at least my work number would work, because I'd been there for 20 years or whatever. And one day through the front desk, the 800 number rang, and they said, there's a Frank Pavich for you. I said, sure, hey Frank, what's up? And he's like, you know about Alejandro Jodorowsky? And I was like, tell me more. And that's, the rest is history, which is cool.
Hi there.
Hey, look.
I was one of the times I chuckled in the film was when Jodorowsky would, and then he came to me, all these cool people would just appear in front of him, like Mick Jagger. Do you have any idea whether that's true or whether some of these meetings were arranged?
That's a good question. The question is it true that the people just appeared everywhere? Mick Jagger just walked up to him and all that. So, Jodorowsky is kind of a merry trickster, right? I mean, that's part of his. And if you get deeper into his philosophy, he's written kind of metaphysical books, and he's more than just a director. So I definitely recommend looking up as many books as you can get of his. I'm reading Psycho Magic, which is pretty intense. So he's all about, art has to be active. It's got to be a transformative thing that you bleed and really participate in. And so I don't think he's necessarily like a liar, but I think from what he might be, he's known to like verbally cut off my arms.
I never meant to imply a liar. No. I just was very curious whether people humored him and set these things up.
Oh, if they kind of set him up on him. I don't think so. I think that from what Frank told us in New York recently, these stories are totally true. Dali lived at the St. Regis in New York for 10 years, so that might have been known that he was at that hotel. But running into Mick Jagger, that's a pretty funny one. You got to wonder what Mick might have been on, or what the scene was. But Mick had been dabbling in weird movies too, obviously at the time, and weird soundtracks himself, and all kinds of. It was a heady time, as it were. But if you get into reading about him, he studied under like Marcel Marceau, and he had a love affair with Gurdjieff's daughter, the guy who invented the Enneagram system. And there's these 1,000,006 degrees of separation that'll blow your mind with Alejandro Jodorowsky. We didn't get to barely any of them in the movie, so I suggest reading Wikipedia at least. Any other stuff, or we're finally let you out of here? But thanks so much. Thanks for coming out. Is any artists in the bunch here? Anybody an artist here? You're all artists. That's right. Just hopefully it will inspire you. We're hearing a lot of that from the field, as all those people saying that they're digging it.
How many have read the book?
I have a question.
One more.
How did Jodorowsky himself respond to seeing the storyboards animated?
I think he liked it. I mean, Frank was sitting right next to him at Cannes when this debuted, and Frank obviously terrified. I mean, can you imagine being a director doing a film about that director? Right. So the whole time, this process, I'm talking to Frank in the middle of the night, and he's like, "This is gnarly, man. Yeah, this is like pretty scary." And even just going to like Giger's house and stuff like that, crazy. He's like, next day he's like, I was in Giger's castle last night. Yeah, it's pretty wild. But he, kind of looked over at Alejandro, and Alejandro and his wife were both wiping away tears, So he knew, and he said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "It's perfect." Alejandro approved, and I got to meet him in New York with my fiancée Jennifer here. We got to meet Alejandro Jodorowsky a couple of weeks ago at the MoMA. Totally intense. And he was like, they were like, "This is the guy who did the music." And he's like, "Oh, I like the music." And I was like, "Thank you, I'm out." I don't want to say. That's all I needed to know. Thank you. So you talk about vibe. The guy's like radiating. You got to stand back because it's intense. So anyway.
Did he offer you any pot?
No, I don't think he needs it anymore, man. He's actually pretty clean living. He's all like, vegetarian, no alcohol, no caffeine. Like, he's like, that's why he's 84 in the movie. Yeah, so he's a rather spry fella.
Will this movie get to Netflix and stuff like that?
Yeah, it'll definitely be out. It'll be, I think, like cable and Netflix and all that stuff. I just don't know when, but yeah. Thanks to Steve for being here.
Let's go.